In this lesson, we're going to begin discussing preferences. I'm going to start with no documents open. If I change any of my preferences with no documents open, I'm changing the preferences for all future documents. Existing documents save preferences in the document itself. The fastest way into preferences on a Mac is to hit Command-K, on a PC, Control-K. We're going to start in the General section, but before we do that, I'm going to tell you that most of InDesign's default preferences are perfectly fine the way they are. I'll occasionally change a preference to solve a problem. Let me give you an example. Let's say that I'm working on an ad for a magazine that's in Europe. Well, all the dimensions for that ad are probably going to be in centimeters. So just for that one ad, I'm going to go into my units and increments and change from the default picas to centimeters for both horizontal and vertical rulers. In that way, when I'm working on my ad, I'll know exactly what I'm doing, and I won't have to worry about converting from picas to centimeters or from inches to centimeters. When I'm done with the ad, I could go back to picas or inches for both. Why don't we go through the preferences from the very beginning? I'm going to go back up to the General section. And the only thing that I'm going to talk about in this section is something called Reset All Warning Dialogues. One of the things that happens with InDesign users is they'll get a warning dialogue letting them know that they did something wrong. And a lot of people find these dialogues annoying. So they check Don't Show Again. The only problem with doing that is if you do the same thing wrong again, you're not going to know. InDesign is just not going to do what you're asking it to do. Not a good thing. So I can go into Preferences and reset all of my warning dialogues. I'm just going to click OK. And now all of the warning dialogues that I turned off will now be available again. So I know what I did that InDesign did not like. The next section is brand new in the new version of InDesign. It's called Sync Settings, and it's a Creative Cloud feature. The way it works is I'm working on a particular computer with InDesign, and if I sign in with my Adobe ID, which I did, I can sync the settings to Creative Cloud. Let me do that. I'm going to click Sync Settings now. And it's synced all of the settings that are checked to Creative Cloud. So if I were to go on another one of my computers and sign on there, I'm going to have all the same settings. So I'll have all of the workspaces that I'm used to, my customized menus, all of my glyphs, any PDF presets that I may have set up for exporting Acrobats, and also any keyboard shortcuts. So I'll feel totally at home no matter what computer I'm working on, as long as I sign in with my Adobe ID. Very cool. Next, I'm going to go to the Interface section. And I'm sure you've noticed by now, if you're used to the old versions of InDesign, things have changed dramatically with the interface in this new version of InDesign. The most obvious thing is something called Color Theme. By default, a medium dark interface is chosen for a theme. This looks very similar to what you may see for the interface in Illustrator and Photoshop. But if you don't like this particular theme, you can click down on the pop-up and let's say choose dark, which makes it even darker. So there's even more contrast. Or if I don't like the darker interfaces at all, I can choose some other preset like light. If I want to customize the look, I can go to the scrubby pop-up to the right of the section and just drag down. So I can make it look exactly the way I want. Let me go back to the default, medium dark. In the next section, which is type, there's one thing that is mysteriously not checked. Anyone who knows anything about typography knows that consistent leading in an entire paragraph is important. You want the space between the lines of type within a paragraph to be totally consistent. Well, why is this unchecked? Why don't I leave it unchecked and just click OK? And I'm going to open one of our sample documents. I'm going to go under the File menu to Open. And in chapter number 2, I'm going to select 0204-0205, What's Your Preference? And just click Open. Why don't I go to my Zoom tool? You can hit your Z key if you can't find your Zoom tool. And then just click and drag across the width of the right-hand page on this spread to zoom in a lot closer on this headline at the top of the page. Now, believe it or not, the leading, the space between the lines in this 4-line headline is exactly the same. It's totally consistent. Yet, optically, it looks like the second line is a lot closer to the top line. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to go to my Type tool and just click and drag across the 4 lines of type. And I'm going to open my character panel by clicking on the icon. And you can see that the leading, which is the second field, is 35 points throughout. Well, what's wrong with this second line? Well, because I'm using all caps in this line, or if I had a line with a lot of ascenders and descenders between the 2 lines, they would look closer together. Now, if I checked Make Leading Consistent in paragraphs, I would have to make the lines into separate paragraphs to change the leading. The way it's set up now, I have a forced return, a shift return or shift enter at the end of each line. So they're all part of the same paragraph. There's no paragraph symbol at the end. If I select this second line by clicking 3 times, I can change the leading for just this one line in the paragraph to make it more, so it looks more consistent with the rest of the lines. Well, that's a lot better. Well, why wouldn't I want to make each one of these lines into a separate paragraph to achieve that? Well, there are other features that depend on finding a particular paragraph style and matching it to another style. There's an automatic table of contents feature in InDesign. And the way it works is it will find all instances of a particular paragraph style, bring that text into the table of contents, and use the table of contents style to format the text throughout the table of contents. Well, if I had a paragraph return at the end of each of these lines, each instance, or each line in this case, would be a separate paragraph, which would mean a separate listing in the table of contents. So there are reasons for the way that the default preferences are set up. Let me go back into Preferences and continue. I'm going to hit Command-K on a Mac, Control-K on a PC, and go down to the Type section again. And there's something that I always check to change the defaults. In the drag and drop text editing section, I always check Enable in Layout View. By default, that's not checked. I'm going to leave it checked and show you why. I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to zoom out to my entire page. And actually, why don't I scroll over to my left-hand page? And I'm going to select a paragraph. Drag and drop text editing is really cool, and I love using it in my layout because I end up doing a lot of editing. Now, if I select this one paragraph and then click on it, I can drag it to another insert point in my document, and you can see it move the text. Really kind of nice. I can also move text within a table. Let me zoom in with my zoom tool on this little table, and I'm going to select some of the text in one of the cells. I'm going to click on that text and then hold down Option on a Mac, Alt on a PC. When I drag it into another cell, it actually duplicated the text. I can also do this. Let's say I dragged it into the wrong cell. I could just click on the text and drag it into another cell. So this is a terrific feature for editing. I can also duplicate a word. Select a word and I can duplicate it to another position simply by holding down Option on a Mac, Alt on a PC, and then dragging. And you can see it duplicated it. Really kind of cool. So anything you can select, you can move or duplicate. Really kind of nice. Let me try one other thing. I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to fit my page in the window by hitting Command 0 on a Mac, Control 0 on a PC. I have another frame off to the side over here. Let me select that first paragraph again, and I'm just going to move it into an entirely different frame just by clicking on it and dragging it. I can also duplicate between frames just by clicking on the text that I want to duplicate and then holding down Option Alt and dragging it back into another frame. So it remained in the first frame and was duplicated into the other frame that I dragged it to. So you can see drag and drop text editing may be a good thing to change in your preferences. In the next lesson, we're going to continue discussing preferences.